Okay, it's currently 3:30, so we are going to get started. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the CDTC New Visions 2050 Learning Series. Today, we are going to focus on pedestrian safety in the capital region and how CDTC and our regional partners are creating safe systems for pedestrians. Today, we will do an introduction and a really brief overview on New Visions in CDTC and what it says about pedestrian safety. And then we're going to hear from John Scavo, who's the Director of Planning at the Town of Clifton Park, and then Ross Farrell, who's the Director of Planning for the Capital District Transit Authority, or CDTA. We'll wrap up with a brief discussion of some of the ongoing safety education and outreach strategies and resources that are available. And then we'll do a discussion, questions if you have any. In the meantime, if you do have questions during the presentation, please use the chat box or you can use the Q&A function. So New Visions is a blueprint for a regional transportation system that reflects our shared vision for the future. It's a 30-year guide that prioritizes, that helps guide prioritization and funding of investment decisions. It's been developed collaboratively through our regional transportation providers, local governments, state agencies, private sector stakeholders, and of course the public. Most of you, I think, are familiar with CDTC, but if you're not, CDTC is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Capital District. Our stakeholders include our members include the State Department of Transportation, CDTA, the Regional Planning Commission, the airport, the Thruway, the Port of Albany. There are about 77 municipalities. It includes 4 counties, except for the northeastern little corner of Saratoga County there. And it also includes 8 cities. So New Visions was adopted just in September, but we have been working on this plan and program for over a year. And we've moved right into implementation. So if your town board, city council, zoning or planning board, or any other organization is interested in learning more about New Visions or receiving virtual training, please contact CDTC and we will schedule something. The New Visions Learning Series is a monthly series of webinars that will cover different topics in New Visions and allow folks to ask questions, and we can get into more details and learn how you can play a role in implementing the New Visions 2050 plan. So the next webinar is scheduled for November 17th, and it will be on infrastructure. So if you're wondering what's in the plan, New Vision consists of various documents, including 11 technical area papers, including, as you can see, safety and also bicycle and pedestrian. And these are really deep dives into these topics where you can find extensive data, trends, recommendations, and strategies for going forward. New Visions provides a snapshot of the region as far as growth, infrastructure conditions, and performance. So this October is the first ever National Pedestrian Safety Month. So that is why we chose pedestrian safety to focus on today. In the US, a pedestrian is sadly killed in a traffic crash every 84 minutes. And despite significant improvements in safety technologies and vehicle crashes, pedestrians, who are the most vulnerable road users, are not seeing major improvements. So one of the major policy recommendations in New Visions is adoption of a safe systems or Vision Zero policy. And this makes us acknowledge that humans make errors, humans are vulnerable to injury, responsibility to safety on the road is shared. No serious injury or death is acceptable. And it's all about being proactive instead of reactive. And our new vision investment principles, which are the centerpiece of the plan, emphasize the need to invest in safety. So CDTC has increased regional investments in walking and bicycling infrastructure, which has resulted in a better network accessible by more people. So it's no surprise that people are walking in downtowns and town centers across the region more. They're walking to the bus more. And they're walking in designated spaces like trails more. And while here in the region, we've seen safety improvements, there is still an unacceptable level of death and serious injuries. So setting a goal of moving towards zero deaths is a radically different perspective on implementing safety solutions, but doable. And today we'll give some examples of how this is already being done in the capital region. So in 2016, Governor Cuomo announced New York's first ever comprehensive pedestrian safety plan. This 5-year plan provides $110 million for engineering and infrastructure improvements and public education and enforcement efforts. 2 of the 20 focus communities identified in the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan are here in the capital region, and they include Albany and Schenectady. So the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan recommends a systemic approach to safety, which means large-scale investments, not just investing in a single hotspot or intersection, but along corridors and around high pedestrian traffic areas. Earlier this year, CDTC released its first ever local road safety action plan. So this really dug into data for the capital region and tailored recommendations for safety improvements to the regional context. It identified common types of crashes and other roadway and crash characteristics. The final plan can be found on the CDTC website. Other CDTC planning initiatives are captured in the New Visions 2050 plan and the Safety and Security White Paper, technical area paper. It identifies local road safety actions and strategies. And like we've talked about, moving to zero, reducing risk on the roadways, considering the context of different intersections within the community, and really committing to a long-term cultural shift in how we discuss safety and address safety. So there are several ongoing CDTC initiatives available to communities to assist with pedestrian safety planning, education, and outreach, like Capital Coexist, our linkage planning program. Statewide, we're working with other MPOs to compile information and develop educational resources and other strategies. The local road safety action plan and our community planning technical assistance program. So we'll get into a little more details on resources and strategies after the next 2 presentations. So first I want to introduce John Scavo, who's going to give the perspective of the town of Clifton Park and their progress in implementing pedestrian safety projects. Okay, John, you're the host.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. I appreciate the opportunity to highlight some of the local pedestrian safety measures that we've enacted in Clifton Park recently. And as you can imagine, over the last year, we have seen an increase in pedestrian activities. My first slide here is just an example of one of the pedestrian bridges that we installed in the last 2 years. We actually had one installed 2 weeks ago, but it's still under construction in the Bishop Ferry Nature Preserve over the historic Erie Canal. So it provides connections to natural resources that have seen an increase in demands over the summer and right into the fall. You know, getting to local pedestrian safety enhancements, what we found as a suburban community is as our population has continued to grow, people want to be able to walk to destination, and we're becoming a more urban environment, less reliant on vehicles. Vehicles are still the primary means of transportation, but vehicles need to coexist with bicyclists and pedestrians. So I'd say over the last 20 years especially, pedestrian safety has been a focus in Clifton Park. And one of the challenges is when it becomes elevated to a level where you may have already 500 linear feet of roadway, is trying to retrofit that suburban environment. So I just added a quote here from Jeff Olson at the bottom that just notes, some quit due to slow progress, never grasping the fact that slow progress is progress. And what I want to do with this presentation is just highlight some of the low-hanging fruit items that are available as treatments, so that if you do a couple of these a year, within 2-3 years, you start seeing the compounding effects of the low-hanging fruit while you apply for other bigger ticket items that may be through a transportation improvement project or program grant or other opportunities. So one of the things that Clifton Park has as a resource, and the Capital Region, as many of you know, is the Capital District Transportation Commission committee, who's hosting this webinar today. And I wanted to highlight this document because it was put out in 2019, so it's fairly current. It was October of last year, and it came out, it was sponsored by CDTC and had consultants from VHB reach out to stakeholders and work with the Capital District Transportation Committee to develop guidance documents to assist communities. So this is available right on CDTC's website. But what I really liked about it is they get into the data and the statistics, but then you can see the graphic here gives some visual items that the general public or elected officials can skim through, look at, and say, yes, this makes sense. So what I try to do is when we evaluate local road safety, understanding that there's a process of gathering data, inputting the data into a system, and then what are the results of the data or outcomes that are expected. So what I like about here is you can see in blue are some goals of identifying intersections with high risk factors. And how do you do that? You conduct intersection inventories, commit to conducting a set of numbers of an inventory per year. So monitoring use, there's some other good examples in regards to any planning projects that you may have in front of you that offer current traffic counts. Again, that's been a challenge over this last year, but hopefully things will get back to normal in the near future. The other thing with this is it lays out the blueprint. So you don't have to start from scratch as a local municipality of saying, how do I begin with understanding local pedestrian safety enhancements, and what factors should I be aware of, and what specifically should I be looking for? So this is a great resource. If you hadn't had an opportunity to review the plan, I would encourage you to at least download it, skim through it, because there are some great points, and especially these bubble icons that are within the plan really highlight and summarize the deliverables and outcomes that I think any local community in the Capital Region can implement. The next slide here is, I am fortunate in Clifton Park that I have a diverse group of volunteers that have both engineering and law enforcement background when it comes to transportation. So they can talk not only about the operations of safety, but also the enforcement aspect. And they can also offer different perspectives based on the items we're looking at. So this is a committee of 10 volunteers. We actually just met last evening. We meet once a month or as needed. And I can tell you, as a local planner, I've learned more from retired DOT engineers and state troopers that live in Clifton Park than I think I could ever grasp in regards to transportation, just through dialogues and meetings with these folks. So one of the things I would encourage communities to do is tap into your local community, see who's out there as volunteers, if anything, to help do a resource analysis or inventory on specific intersections or focus points for your communities. So Clifton Park, when we developed our pedestrian safety action plan, we came up with some basic concepts that we wanted to jump into. And again, we have some bigger ticket items, but what could we do with our local forces that, one, is fairly inexpensive, that won't make too much of a dent in our budget, and two, the public's going to realize the benefits pretty quickly. And what we did is we came up with 5 very simple enhancements that we could look at doing. And one was identify mid-block crossings in the town. These are crosswalks that don't link up necessarily with an intersection, but I'll give an example. On Vischer Ferry Road, which is a county route, we have the Clifton Commons, which is an athletic facility, which has a mid-block crossing from a multi-use path. So mid-block crossings are problematic because it's not an intersection necessarily where the vehicles have the visual cues or would be looking for pedestrians to be crossing, even if it's marked with a crosswalk. So we look at how we can enhance that with signage, and most recently, rectangular rapid flashing beacons that 10 years ago weren't even an option, but under today's transportation technologies, it's in MUTCD and it's an allowed use, and we've implemented 8 installations in Clifton Park, and we've identified 11 more installations that we're going to continue to place these rectangular rapid flashing beacons in use. This intersection in the photo that I'm showing here shows a 4-way stop sign. All we did here was we put a high visibility crosswalk in, so we repainted that crosswalk. That's an outdated photo. But what you can see on the stop sign is, instead of the channel lock metal post, we used a highly reflective 3M tape product that goes right over the post, that at night is very reflective and visible when headlights shine on that. So it just draws attention to the 4-way stop. You can also use yellow tape or a fluorescent green tape for the pedestrian crosswalk signs, and we have used those also. And once we deployed this, we used 4 prominent intersections that were both 4-way stops in mid-block crossings in Clifton Park. We actually got feedback from pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists saying that they appreciated the treatment because it brought visual cues and awareness to the intersection that they felt were lacking previously. And that spun requests for other intersections. So, feedback is one of the greatest tools to see how the community reacts to some of these treatments. The other thing that we've looked at is pedestrian ramps. Accessibility is a huge issue, and we want to make sure that sidewalks don't terminate without coming to a shoulder, and just don't have a curb drop where you may have mountable curbs. So curb ramps, we've looked at what was out there. We did an inventory, and we upgraded our curb ramps to meet current state building code and ADA requirements. Also, in enhancing crossings, crosswalks like you see in the picture, we used a tape product that is high visibility. There's also glass bead technology that you can use for highly reflective crosswalks. I would say in the Northeast, at best, you're looking at 3 years life expectancy with any crosswalk enhancement, but it should be something that's factored into a community as part of ongoing maintenance. And then left turn traffic calming. This was really through our planning board. that we looked at opportunities to provide cross-access easements amongst parcels, limit curb cuts along busy routes, and try to reduce some of those left turn conflicts, because what we find is when vehicles are looking to make a left turn out, they're looking in one direction and may not see cyclists or pedestrians. In addition to that, we also instituted traffic calming visual cues, and that included street trees, benches, and visual artwork. Sometimes along a heavily traveled corridor, just having a bench along the way in strategic points reminds motorists that they're sharing the road with pedestrians. Visual art such as street sculptures, which you can see in Clifton Park. There's two prominent ones that were put up. They're modern art pieces along Clifton Country Road. They are interesting focal points that if you put benches around them and they're near coffee shops, folks will gather there. So you create that vibrancy in the downtown that give drivers the visual cues that you've arrived someplace, that it's not just dominated by the vehicles. So the vehicles respect those other modes of transportation within our town center. Then also, again, this is a real simple graphic, but what I wanted to show here was just using aerial imagery today, such as Google or Bing Maps. You have the ability to mark stuff, these images up in a PDF format, and just highlight from the street level to a bird's eye view of some simple enhancements. And this is a corridor in Clifton Park where we had existing and proposed pedestrian crosswalks to make a connection along a trail route that is scheduled to be installed in the next 2 years. And to the right in this image, what you'll see is Moe Road, and we have the Moe Road Trail. And the Moe Road Trail is a 10-foot wide multi-use path that runs the length of Moe Road from Route 146 south past Grooms Road, which is a county route. One of the challenges that we found at some of the intersections is in New York State, you can take a right on red. There were conflicts with vehicles turning right into pedestrians and cyclists because they're looking left to see, can I make the right on red? So a couple of the high traffic intersections, we had to restrict, and I circled the no right turn on red signs that were put up to reduce those conflicts. So again, path was put in at a time where traffic volumes were less. Over the last decade, the need has arisen with a 1% background growth in this corridor to restrict right on reds, not only because of vehicle traffic, but also the increase in bike and pedestrian traffic along the route. Then this other image I want to show, because you can also, as a community, and many of the smaller communities have state or county routes going through their communities. I would encourage the CDTC linkage program for any community that has a high visibility state or county route going through their community to look at a corridor study for opportunities to improve crosswalk and pedestrian safety and bicycle safety. And this is an example when we did the Exit 9 corridor study that was funded by CDTC. We noted, and it was reinforced by our Highway Safety Committee, the needs of this intersection. And the photo in the upper left will show in 07 photo, we only had one crosswalk on the west side of Route 146 from Moe Road on the approach. We were proposing a future sidewalk on the opposite side and crosswalks on both intersections because there's a sidewalk that runs along Route 146. We also have funding for a new sidewalk on the north side of 146. And we also only had these call buttons that I don't think people realized actually cycled the signal for them to cross in terms of getting the green light, because you have the loop detectors in the pavement, but unless a car is there tripping the loop detector, it would never cycle through to allow a pedestrian to cross. So at the time, we just had the call buttons. And what we did is we requested in 08 enhancements to be made as part of a repaving project that DOT was doing. And again, this was low-hanging items that they were able to retrofit for intersections in Clifton Park. And I just highlighted one, but they all received similar treatments, was to complete the curb cuts for the upgraded ADA handicapped ramps with detectable warning strips. They did put countdown signals on all four legs with pedestrian crossing signals. So it wasn't just the state highway. It crosses the local roads to both the north and south. Again, this was really no cost to the town other than the initial planning effort to be able to say to the state, once we were put on notice of a potential paving project, that here's the opportunity to do enhancements that the community has already vetted out, and there's a vision that has been reinforced to implement. Pedestrian characteristics. This is something that we look at, whether it's our planning board or highway safety committee or open space trails subcommittee in Clifton Park. When we're looking to make recommendations, these are the characteristics that if you take away as some things to think about, and you can expand your list. I definitely have an expanded Excel spreadsheet that wouldn't present well, so I just picked some of the key points that I use. When I look at an area, especially when I'm talking spot improvements, who are the likely users? So what's it located by, specific destinations, age cohort populations, pedestrian path designs. We have in Clifton Park multi-use paths that are 8 to 10 feet in width down to 5-foot sidewalks to some areas with 4-foot shoulders, which is an expanded bike lane. So width, surface material, vertical clearance where you may have utilities or wires, gradients and ramps, and also often multi-use paths and sidewalks are co-located over other utilities such as sewer. So you may have manhole covers, or you may have water shutoff valves, and how are they incorporated into your design? Then pedestrian crossing elements. When I look at an intersection, I'm looking at signage, tactile surfaces, audible warnings, facility type for the crossing. Am I looking at an intersection that's a roundabout with 4 legs? Am I looking at a mid-block crossing, signalized or unsignalized intersection? And then pedestrian guidance measures, lighting. With the Rexford Bridge project that was done by New York State DOT, there were trail enhancements made along the Route 146 corridor as part of the betterment project for the multi-use path. The town actually put in bollard pedestrian lighting along the trail route to make it known to pedestrians that this is the route you're supposed to walk, especially this time of year where it gets darker earlier. Wayfinding signage, guidance, as you start to make connections, the destinations, and make linkages, people will find their way if they know how to get there. So wayfinding signage for pedestrians is key. And then ped warning signage for vehicles. And then this is a key point too that I think sometimes is overlooked. Accessible vehicle parking bays and access aisles. Many of our multi-use paths are direct connections for neighborhoods, but we do have some folks that their only opportunity to use these paths are to access them either through a handicapped vehicle with a wheelchair ramp and have access to then access the trail route. So we look at if somebody is arriving by an accessible vehicle, where could they park and easily access a trail route? One of the things that we did have in Clifton Park too, again, in conjunction with support from CDTC through their linkage program, is we have implemented a form-based code. So I'm able to actually look at projects in my town center area, present to them right out of my town code. And if you look at many town codes, you don't see graphic images, but the technology's there today to come up with a street design that I can say, here's my build-to line to an applicant, and here's the street elements that you need to incorporate within the public right-of-way adjacent to your project, and also the street elements that should be incorporated into the area from the build-to line to the town right away. And this is an example of Clifton Park Center Road, Clifton Country Road South. The street design elements right in our code, and I'm going to show two examples of recent projects. So this is a mixed-use building that's 38 residential units with storefronts on the first floor. And this is a headline right out of the Gazette: ADA compliant sidewalks, crosswalks to be installed along stretch of Clifton Country Road. This is while it was under construction. That boulevard theme that I just showed out of our town code is this street section. And then this is the finished product. Both the businesses are open. This is new construction. You can see how we connect it. And this is pre-COVID, the desire for outdoor dining areas, two sidewalks with, for the first time in Clifton Park, parallel on-street parking spaces that work very well. And the parallel parking spaces, many of these businesses use for curbside pickup now, that you text that you've arrived at a certain spot and they'll bring the food out to you. When we planned this, it was never with the current situation in mind, but this area was able to adapt and transition well to the current issues that we're all facing. Visible bike racks. This is something that just a small bike rack with every commercial project that you have in a visible location from the streetscape. Cyclists will start coming to these locations as part of a destination. And I took this from the street view because it reminds drivers too, if it's in a visible location and not back behind the business, that there are cyclists in the corridor and pedestrians. This is an example of another project that just received approval 2 months ago in Clifton Park, similar to what I showed that was actually built. This should be going to construction this winter. It's additional parallel parking spaces, additional residential with a commercial use on the first floor. And it's an infill development project where there's 3 existing office buildings that are 30+ years old that were set back. So we're actually retrofitting with infill residential development on an existing commercial site. We're putting in a connector street, the Shoppers World Plaza, which is on our future streets map, to also reduce vehicle trips and provide local connections outside of the Route 146 corridor. And we're providing access right from first level residential units to a sidewalk network along Plank Road. So we're very excited about getting this project underway. And it's not an all or nothing. People would say, well, you're infilling, but you're leaving 3 30+ buildings behind it. It allows revenues to be generated that will allow for the adaptive reuse of those commercial office buildings behind. And then when they are obsolete, the redevelopment can occur in time over the next decade or two of the commercial space, and it'll be in more compliance with our form-based code as time goes on. So incremental street level changes. This is a project that's in front of us, and it'll be back in front of our planning board November 10th within our town center. This is just showing on the private sector how we tie in commercial sidewalks into our street network and how we make those connections to proposed restaurants. Here's a 12,000 square foot restaurant facility with 1.5 acres of outdoor dining that's being proposed right now. And it's a great use that we think will complement our town center. We're looking forward to working with the applicant to getting this to construction in the very near future. This is our pedestrian action safety plan in Clifton Park. Clifton Park was lucky enough to be a recipient of the competitive funding for the PSAP grant, and we should be wrapping up our right-of-way acquisitions in the month of November, going to final design approvals in December, then out to bid in January and February for spring of 2021 construction. You can see here, this is just a simple image showing ped improvements at signalized and unsignalized intersections. And I'm going to focus on one intersection at School Drive that had some previous enhancements that we're coming back to and making even better. This is School Drive. And what we looked at, and I pulled this image, is you can see we jogged because there was a town park, the sidewalk around the utility pole, because at the time, the utility pole was $90,000 for a relocation. So we got creative and have a short jog, but you can see the existing conditions show steady beacon, circular beacon lights that warn of pedestrian crosswalks at the school entrance. And we use the MUTCD R1-6 yield to pedestrian and crosswalk signs that are right into the pavement. We're coming back to this intersection now to put rectangular rapid flashing beacons in that are PED activated, because what we found is drivers become immune to the lights when they're flashing constantly. But if you use the RFBs that are only activated when a pedestrian pushes the button, you get greater compliance. So this is one of those projects that in the last slide here that will be going to construction to further enhance the intersection. And with that, that's just some of the local examples. What I would encourage anybody to do is if you have any questions or you want specifics about thoughts or comments at intersections you may have, please feel free to reach out to me. If I can't answer it, I surround myself with people much smarter than me, like folks at CDTC and my local highway safety committee. I will follow up with answers for you and help in any way I can.
Thanks, John. Those are really great recommendations and a great example of what one of our large towns is doing to significantly improve pedestrian safety. So now if you could make Ross the host, we will, okay, Ross, you are the host. So if you would like to share your screen, we'll shift over to the perspective of CDTA, who has been implementing a number of pedestrian safety projects around major transit routes. Should be all set, Ross.
All right, thanks, Jen. Let me just try to get this into the slideshow format. All right, thanks, Jen, and thanks, John. That was a great presentation and sort of a great example of municipalities that are working to make their areas more friendly to pedestrians, and when that happens, makes areas more friendly to public transit. And so the reason that CDTA gets involved with pedestrian safety and building pedestrian infrastructure is that the basic rule that all transit riders start as pedestrians. And really starting about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, we started to say, well, because the pedestrian environment is so critical to attracting people to use public transit, we need to sort of take that on as part of our mission and part of the task that we hope to complete. We do this in a number of different ways. We work with local governments and developers when they are in the process of building new facilities. We comment on those projects and ask for pedestrian infrastructure or transit infrastructure to be put into place. And then a lot of the times, though, we do sort of a different way of looking at it, which is where the design is done by either CDTA or DOT or municipality, and then the construction of that infrastructure is done by CDTA or the municipality. So sometimes it's CDTA both doing the design and the construction. Sometimes CDTA does the design and we hand it off to a municipality or DOT to construct. And then there's other times where we're part of the planning process, but the municipality or DOT is doing both design and construction. And a lot of where this is focused and effort is focused is on our BRT corridors, because those are the corridors with the most amount of ridership. And this is the 40 miles of bus rapid transit map. The first red line was put into place in 2011. Starting on November 8th, the blue line will be in operation, and then the purple line, which aspects of the project are currently under construction or have been constructed, will continue construction next year with an opening in either late 2020 or early 2023. And all of these corridors combined, even though it's only 40 miles, count for about 60% of CDTA's ridership. In each one of the station locations are areas that have a high amount of transit ridership, and with that, a high amount of pedestrian volume. So what is it that we build or advocate to have built or design for, and then someone else builds? It's all of the things that you would think of to improve pedestrian safety. It's road diets, it's putting in signal timers, new crosswalks, bulb outs and bump outs, center medians, and connections to other infrastructures such as bike trails and multi-use trails. So really whatever type of pedestrian infrastructure you could think of, we have been a part of or constructed ourselves. One good example of the partnership from beginning to end is what happened with the New York 5 pedestrian safety study. As part of that, CDTA was part of that study, a key stakeholder throughout its creation, and it came up with a number of different improvements that could happen on New York Route 5. For transit, some of those were as very simple as moving bus stops that were mid-block at unsignalized intersections up to signalized intersections. But other things were more involved, and I'll give two examples. So the first was our major station next to Colonie Center. This is on the Red Line, major location for ridership, but also of transfers. And there was just a very difficult situation with a high volume roadway for traffic, also being the point that there were a number of pedestrians crossing the roadway. So what ended up happening as part of the study is DOT actually constructed this center median, which provided the opportunity, which restricted some turn movements, but also provided the opportunity for pedestrians to just cross the roadway 2 lanes at a time. And as everyone can know from being a pedestrian, if you're only having to pay attention to traffic in one direction without significant amount of turning movements, and the width of the roadway you're crossing is narrower, the safer it becomes. So that's one of those examples where the planning was done with CDTA, but then the design and construction was done by another entity, in this case, New York State DOT. The next station is the Lark Library Station. This was constructed two summers ago. It's also on the Red Line, but will be a station for the future Purple Line. And it had really the worst pedestrian safety record of any intersection on New York Route 5, but I think actually in all of the capital region. This was also one of the busiest, and actually today is the #1 busiest CDTA bus stop. So a lot of that pedestrian traffic was being produced by CDTA bus routes, and not just the Red Line serves this location. There's about 10 other bus routes that serve this point. So we had a lot of issues, and we knew that we kind of needed to take this on ourselves and build something that was better, not just for CDTA and its customers, but for traffic in general, bicyclists and pedestrians, whether they were going to or from the transit location. And this is just the higher level view of what was constructed. Basically, we made it a mid-block crossing that wasn't there before, signalized it, and had a safe pedestrian crossing. We relocated on-street parking and created a bus bay for up to 4, and actually, really, you can get 5 buses in the location at one time. And what this overall did, and the signal there is actually has a queue jumper, which allows, even though the buses are in the bay, to come out of the bay and not be blocked by vehicular traffic. And this made a huge difference, because what it did was, one, created a new, safer crossing, but it made the crossing for people using transit to happen at the point where there was no turning movements. And that's a huge benefit overall, because that's when the most amount of conflicts occur. as actually John was talking about in part of his presentation, is when a vehicle is turning. So this has made a substantial improvement overall for the city as well as for CDTA riders. And again, through the consolidation of bus stops and through these improvements, it is now the #1 stop in our entire system. So this is a project where, on the reverse, CDTA was part of the planning, CDTA did the design, and CDTA did the actual construction. The next line I'm going to go into is the one that's the most recent, which is the blue line, being built literally as we speak. It is our second BRT line, which again is going to open November 8th. Here's just a quick outline. It's actually comprised of two routes, the 922 and the 923, that overlap at the main sort of trunk of the corridor from Lansingburg down to the south end, but then with branches to Cohoes and Waterford, and up 2nd Avenue and down to the Albany County Rail Trail. And these are some sites shelters that were recently put in within the last about month or two. So the first part is obviously the actual new shelter itself and the pylon, which is the identifier. But as you can see, especially with the picture on the right, we put in a bump out, a new sidewalk, street furniture, and as much as we can do in areas that have a limited amount of space to improve the environment. No, excuse me. Another example, actually to the right, this is a great example where we partnered with the City of Albany on design and construction of aspects of the South End connector, which was at the part of the Albany County Rail Trail. And so this is an example where you see the mix of a pedestrian crossing, BRT station, cycle track, multi-use pathway, all coming together at one point. And parts of this were built by City of Albany, and parts of this are now being built in another location about a half-mile down by CDTA. But the design was worked in partnership, and luckily we both had the same consultant, which was Creighton Manning Engineering, which of course makes design coordination a lot easier when you have the same consultant. Next example of a project that was partially designed by CDTA, partially designed by a municipality, and then constructed by a municipality is the City of Cohoes when they restructured or reconstructed Remsen Street. What happened here, and you can see the pad on both the left and the right image, but basically the city took a two-way street, made it one way, put in a number of different street improvements, but actually constructed the bus pad and the bump out that we use to put in our bus shelter. This is an older image. I think the shelter has actually been put in this week, or will be put in soon. But this, again, is a significant amount of infrastructure that was done by, and thank you to the City of Cohoes, was done by the City of Cohoes in coordination with CDTA. Another example of a project where it's sort of mixed responsibilities, and I'm sorry for the grainy image here, but in Menands Broadway, from Riverview Center to the city line, we had done the design to do a road diet of that entire length of Broadway. And if you know it now, Broadway from the city of Waterville up to Riverview Center is traffic calmed with shoulders and bike lanes, but then it sort of opens up to a very wide roadway between Riverview Center and especially Ward's Lane, where it can be up to 6 lanes wide. Really no need for that amount of capacity, more need for improvements for bicyclists and pedestrians. And actually, if you look, there is, and this is an older image, but there is now a bike pathway being constructed along 787, the on-ramp to 787 that goes to the Hudson River. We're also putting in a BRT station, which is shown to the best of my ability here, to the right of the on-ramp that'll serve Riverview Station. Again, this design preliminary concept was done by CDTA. Parts of it were passed off to DOT, who's doing really the construction from the ramp all the way to the city line. And then the rest of the construction is around the station area is occurring by CDTA. So really a great partnership between CDTA, New York State DOT, and the Village of Menands, which will make a significant improvement for pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit in the Menands area. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Jen and John. Again, CDTA is really in the infrastructure game more so than I think most other transit authorities or mid-sized transit authorities in the region. And so if there's any municipalities that want to make improvements or looking at improvements along a corridor with bus service, we definitely want to partner with you because any benefit to a pedestrian is a benefit to transit. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Jen. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. If you could make me the host, that'd be great. Like Ross said, everyone becomes a pedestrian at some point in their trip. So really highlighting how transit and pedestrians are connected and how to make it safer for pedestrians to access transit is important. So thank you, Ross, for that really great presentation.
And is this not working out here? Hold on 1 second.
Okay, just gotta, I'm the host now. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So we just heard from a town and then we heard from a transit agency on things that they are doing to improve pedestrian safety. And you may be wondering what resources are out there right now for your community to get working on some pedestrian safety initiatives. So currently there are 2 specific funding resources. This is the Capital Coexist mini grant, and then there's the Community Technical Assistance Program. So the Community Technical Assistance Program is a joint program with the Capital District Regional Planning Commission, and communities can apply for smaller scale studies, not quite linkage scale of a project, but a smaller scale. And some of the assistance that is offered is analysis of crash data and crash diagram development, signal operation analysis, before and after safety and operations studies, and recommendation and scoping of ITS strategies. There are other types of projects that are available through that program, but those are the most related to safety that you might be interested in. And that program, we are currently accepting applications on an ongoing basis. If you have questions about it or if you're interested in something, please reach out to CDTC. Then the other program is the Capital Coexist mini grant program. So this program was launched in 2016 with the purpose of meeting people where they are. So CDTC had been doing bicycle and pedestrian safety outreach on its own, going throughout the region and trying to educate people on safety. And we realized that there were so many great events going on in communities, and there were great community organizations that were already doing work and interfacing with the public daily. And they had an opportunity to do some of this work for us. So we've launched this program. It has a very low max limit of $5,000, and you cannot use it for capital projects, but just education and outreach types of initiatives. We've made it available to local governments, nonprofits, and first responders, including law enforcement, And it really focuses on the 4 E's of engineering, education, enforcement, and encouragement. We've funded so far over 30 different projects all over the region, ranging from events like helmet fittings to walking school buses that are related to Safe Routes to School programming, to demonstrations, or the construction of a short-term infrastructure project. So maybe using paint or really low-cost materials to show how an engineering treatment might change the street, and then conducting surveys, doing outreach, and really teaching people how to use it, and then getting their feedback afterwards. And these projects have been helpful in leading to more long-term changes or helping with the planning process. One partner that has implemented a lot of demonstrations is Capital Roots, and they've worked with a number of our cities and our departments of health. And you don't have to work with them to use their creative approach, but they are a great partner, and they do work in most of the region. So the mini grant program solicitation for 2020 is winding down, and there will be a new solicitation for 2021 released before the end of the year. So if you're interested in that, please reach out and let me know, and I can provide you with more information. Other resources in terms of grant funding and types of assistance include the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee, the National Complete Streets Coalition, the National Center for Safe Routes to School, and your county. The State Department of Health is a great resource. They've done a lot of the CBC in education, but also your county Department of Health is probably doing pedestrian safety education. If you're in Albany County, the Albany County Department of Health has been very active in doing complete streets education, working with local governments to help develop ordinances, educating people about pedestrian safety, and even providing resources for demonstration projects. They have a lending library where you can request materials and to borrow materials for your demonstration project if you're in Albany County. So those are just some resources that are available. So if you have any questions about today's presentation, I welcome you now to use the chat or the Q&A function, but you may also email CDTC. You can text or leave a voicemail on our virtual voicemail box. We are back in the office occasionally, so you can also call. You can follow us on social media, and everything that we referenced today can be found on our website at cdtcmpo.org. So now I'm going to open it up to questions, if anyone has them. And John and Ross, if you want to chime in and answer, feel free. So we have one question. What does it take to build pedestrian islands, such as the ones Ross showed at Colonie Center, also on State Route 146 by Shen campus, namely at the 5-lane Moe Road intersection that John showed, so Shen students and town library goers could cross it more safely? How can...
So I would say input with DOT as part of a plan. The pedestrian islands, I'm a big proponent of whenever we look at safety considerations, because as our population ages, those islands provide a refuge from people who may not be as mobile as other folks in the population are. So it gives them an opportunity before they cross the next leg to have that refuge. Shen campus is a great example as a high pedestrian and cyclist generator that would warrant it. But I would say at that location, it's really going to be dependent to talk with our stakeholders at DOT, because as much as I love the pedestrian islands, the DOT folks who plow in the winter will call me every curse word in the book. So it's changing that culture and showing how it can work. How you could potentially put mountable curb and do treatments that can coexist in the Northeast. during the winter months when those large state plow trucks are out. And it's really the wing plows that are the problem because they really can't see too well where that curb is. So I know on state roads it's a challenge, and I would like to acknowledge that area. I did have the opportunity, I know Jen had them present at one of the CDTC meetings, to work with one of the first league robotic teams from Shenandoah. I worked with two over the last year, and one presented with CDTC, and they morphed into a advocacy club called Cyclist and Pedestrian Mobility Advocacy Club at Shen. And, I'd be remiss in not mentioning that as part of, as much as I've got a highway safety committee, when I was meeting with middle school kids, they're bringing up the same issues that we discuss here as adults. So kids are out there, they're walking, they're on their bikes. So I would encourage any stakeholders or community leaders to reach out to the young population, because they can have a discussion like we just did today, and they're talking about the same issues we do. So it really transcends age groups.
So true. We should remember that kids, that they're not getting around by car, and they have such a great perspective on the transportation system and what works and what doesn't work or feels safe and doesn't feel safe. So, and just to, build upon that, CDTC continues to work with all of our towns and the state DOT to help coordinate and provide assistance in planning. So all of these safety issues that are, mentioned, we're aware and continuing to work and identify feasible solutions. So thank you for that.
Jen,
Go ahead,
Jen,
Ross.
just the one with the island that I showed, to reinforce what John said, we originally put out the BRT line and constructed it in 2010 and wanted that island to be there and that pedestrian refuge, but for the same reasons, the issues with snow clearance, etc., that there was not the buy-in from DOT. But after a while, obviously because it's built now and they built it, it was brought up and was promoted. We try to do these wherever we can, but exactly what John is saying, we're not the municipality, and you get a lot of pushback from folks on the plowing end of things, and can sometimes be understandable is the fact that it does create a potential barrier for someone to, drive into. That's why if you saw on my image, there was this very long guardrail in front of the refuge. So yeah, it can be done. It's just definitely the hardest to get approved versus just doing bump outs and narrowing a roadway. But I think it is by far the most effective because you can cross one or two lanes at a time, and especially for someone who's elderly or disabled, that makes a huge difference.
Thanks, Ross. And someone had also commented that placing benches is really important for elderly and disabled pedestrians. I completely agree, and that is something that we do hear from folks when we do surveys about pedestrian amenities as having benches, so that allows them to walk more, so that they know that there is a place for them to stop and rest if they need to. John, someone has asked if you could share any left turn traffic calming interventions.
Yes, one of the things that I'd say that New York State DOT has been great doing in recent years, and the town are starting to implement on high volume roads, is where you have multi-lane roads, and a lot of the left turn pedestrian conflicts are because the left turning vehicle is taking a high rate of speed through an intersection and cutting across the double solid yellow at an angle. So the best thing you could do is some sort of a hardening treatment of bollards or rubber curbs to block the diagonal path through an intersection. But in absence of that, DOT, I don't know what the engineering term is. I've heard them called cat tracks, or it's the broken up dotted lines that go through the intersection that assign the turn lane assignment, especially if you have 2 lanes taking a left across the intersection. So it's like a tracked line that provides that lane assignment so people don't cut it at a diagonal angle, and it basically visually reinforces their lane assignment that's at a rate of speed that should be at 15 miles per hour or less when they're making that turn. And I know CDTC has charts, but there's I can't remember the exact resource, Jen, but I think it might be the example I used of the local pedestrian plan that CDTC put out last year. It shows what the casualty rate is and severity of injury at rates of speed. So if you can get drivers reducing their speeds at intersections, it significantly reduces the potential of a fatality. So I would say that's an example of less left lane traffic calming. Would be some sort of an island technique or bulb out in the center of the road to encourage not taking the turn at a sharp angle, or paint for lane assignments. And if you Google Clifton Country Road at Route 146 by Shoppers World Plaza, DOT has those track lines with the left turning lane movements. You can look at an aerial street view in Google Earth for that.
Thanks, John. So if you're interested in seeing the details of the local road safety action plan, you can find them again at our website, cdtcmpo.org, and you can either search it, or if you go to what we do and go to safety, you'll definitely be able to find it. If you're interested, the plan does address specific types of treatments, but in general, if you're interested in what the crash reduction factor or measure is for a certain treatment, definitely feel free to reach out. We can provide guidance. There are factors for each type of infrastructure design, and based on their effectiveness from being applied all over the country. So.
And Jen, can I just give one other example? Because I knew I had it bookmarked here. I know we're not in New York City, but New York City has turn calming program. So if you Google New York City turn calming program, they actually have some great YouTube videos and photos of where they extend even like a painted bulb out with yellow to protect bicyclists in the bicycle lanes from those turning vehicles. So just another example if you're looking for visuals. Again, I know we're not New York City, but you can look at what they're doing and apply it to some local examples at those intersections.
Okay, so I don't see any other questions in the chat or the Q&A. So I think that we covered everything. So thank you again, John, and thank you, Ross, today for making yourselves available to present and answer questions. And attendees, again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to CDTC, visit our website.